Hi, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome. I want to take a minute and just kind of thank all of you for your support and your love. We're continuing with a series on addictions today. And today I'm going to talk about one of the most difficult of all addictions to talk about. So it's a tough one, fantasy addictions. And they are also, by the way, the toughest addictions to work with. So I'll tell you more about that in a couple of minutes. I want to start off by doing the reading from The Language of Letting Go. And I just chose today's reading because I actually posted it on Facebook yesterday, and I want to share it again today. Positive energy. It's so easy to look around and notice what's wrong. It takes practice to see what's right. Many of us have lived around negativity for a lot of years. We become skilled at labeling what's wrong with other people. Our life, our work, our day, our relationships, ourselves, our conduct, and even at times our recovery. We want to be realistic, and our goal is to identify and accept reality. However, this is often not our intent when we practice negativity. The purpose of negativity is usually to be annihilated. Negative thinking empowers the problem. It takes us out of harmony. Negative energy sabotages and destroys. It's a powerful life of its own. So does good, positive energy. Each day we can ask what's right, what's good about other people, our life, our work, our day, our relationships, ourselves, our conduct, and our recovery. Positive energy heals, conducts love, and transforms. Choose positive energy. Today, God, help me let go of negativity, transform my beliefs and thinking at the core, from negative to positive. Put me in harmony with the good. I think one of the things I've learned in life is that negativity is part of life, but for every negative, there's a positive. I have the courage and strength to be able to face things in my life. I can learn something good and something positive from them. So good comes from negativity sometimes. It's part of the process we go through. So today what I want to do is I'm going to talk about addictions that are tough, they're scary, and yet at the same time, there are ways we might migrate towards them to avoid having to look at the same old story, to look at the inside of ourselves as a person. And some of the words I'll talk about today, I want to share them with you. The major ones, I call these addictions of shame and addictions of secrets. We've heard this so many times in the program. We're as sick as our secrets. And so many times in life, secrets are the things that really hold us down, keep us trapped, and keep us in the hole. Also, along with secrets and shame comes fear. And also, very many times behind all of this, there usually is some forms of trauma, things we're trying to hide, run away from, not have to deal with. And a lot, of course, with that comes control. One of the biggest parts about the addictions is the aspect of power. You know, we get into these addictions, we talk about them. Normally, like anything else I've ever said, it goes back to our roots, our foundations, where we come from. And many of us grew up with either messages of shame or we've gone through very shameful situations in our life, embarrassment. And as a result, it kind of becomes our normal. The scary part about it is, if we have these things going on inside of us, we have a tendency to look for excitement, to look for craziness and insanity, because as a child, it was our normal, and the way in which we survived was to go to a fantasy land or create a world that wasn't real. So we see this so many times in our world today, because we look at the aspect of these addictions. For example, drugs and alcohol. This form of drugs and alcohol I've talked about before is basically a way in which I can run, I can hide from life. And as a result, I'm in constant denial of my own alcoholism. Here's the scary part. My life is unmanageable, my life is crazy. But if anybody ever confronts me about that, first thing I can do is I can tell them they're wrong. It's their problem, not my problem. I'm always blaming. And the hardest part for these types of addictions is to be able to accept criticism because I can't handle it. And so what's the easiest thing you do when you get criticized? Put the other person down, put the situation down, make an excuse, and basically put yourself in the hole. And that's why along with it, drugs and alcohol comes sexual addiction. It's almost like an addiction I migrate towards because after a while, it almost becomes normal to me. It becomes like a way of life. And I can literally block out the guilt and the fears or things that go along with it. And as a result, then I get a rush, I get a high from it. It makes me crazy. And at the same time, I get used to it. I'll give you two examples. A gentleman that a priest friend of mine I lived with for, sadly, 6 years. And here's the hardest part about addiction. It's almost like people in this type of an addiction are living two different lives. It's very hard to explain because it's almost like the concept of a multiple personality. When I'm in my sick and crazy world, I block out the other world. When I go into my healthy world or my image healthy world, I block out the other part. So the priest I lived with for 6 years was a pedophile. And yet at the same time, externally, he was in charge of youth programs. People thought he walked on water. They thought he was wonderful. He was great. Organized all kinds of activities, all kinds of stuff. But then he had a secret life. That secret life was hidden inside of him. And literally what it did was it shut him down, closed him off. When he was in that world, the other world didn't exist. And I know this is hard to understand because this association is kind of a mental health term. And it means I can literally live in two worlds at one time. And I'll give you an example what I'm talking about because we talked about this when we talk about the aspect of multiple personalities. Years ago, I worked with a multiple personality, and it's a very powerful thing to work with. I'm not going to use real names. I just use fake names because I don't want to give anybody away. But I'm just going to say Teresa and Karen, just to throw two names out there. Teresa was the crazy one, the sick one. Karen was the healthy one. Karen and I would work together, and all of a sudden, her personality would change into Teresa and start cursing at me and yelling at me and telling me to leave Karen alone. But then she could actually revert back into Karen again and apologize for what just happened. She was aware of what was going on. At the same time, she had no control over it. It's the same thing when it comes to these addictions. It's scary. Because when you're dealing with the concept of this is, I'm aware of what I'm doing, that's my secret. But at the same time, I have to live an image life on the outside. So to the world, I look like I'm all together, look like I'm functioning extremely well. And that's extremely scary because after a while, it literally does a number on your mental health. Because you feel guilty, at the same time, you deny it. And so it's almost like I call it this internal war going on inside of you. There's the sick you and the healthy you. And yet the healthy you is an image. It's not really you. And so a lot of times what happens is externally, I'm kind of dead. So we see this very many times in people that are narcissistic, people that are into power, people that are into control. As another form of addiction, because it means that my self-esteem is so low and down so far. I'm carrying so much hurt and pain. I have to show everybody else how powerful I am, how I know everything, I've got everything all together. And as a result, then, if you ever criticize me or confront me, I'm going to rip you to shreds. I'm going to literally knock you down because I can't handle anybody taking me back into what I've probably experienced. And usually 9 out of 10 times we do therapy with these types of individuals. It's a long-term therapy. very many times we experience the fact there's a deep trauma, something that happened, something needs to be healed. To be able to get that out is really tough to do. And unfortunately, with these types of addictions, sometimes something very drastic has to happen to bring people into reality. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I work with a family here in Jersey, but they originally live in California. Now, on paper, externally, this is what you would call the Beaver Family. The husband had a great job, made good money. They had 3 kids. The kids were in school. The wife was in charge of the PTA. She was active in school activities. But his wife, underneath, had a secret. She had a secret life. For a certain amount of hours every week, she was a very expensive call girl. She had another life going on. He had no knowledge of it. He had no concept at all, because everything else was kept secret. And unfortunately, they only got help and got into a recovery process is when she finally picked the wrong person, got caught, had legal problems, got in all kinds of trouble. And as a result, they actually had to leave the California area, come to New Jersey to be involved in treatment. And that's scary. Because so many times what happens is it's like you're up here and then they find something out about you and you come way down here. It's like you fall from grace. It's the same thing with other addictions that come under this, such as gambling, compulsive shoplifting, the secret addictions, and the compulsion that goes along with this is so powerful and so scary. It's almost like there's this sick energy inside of me that I actually migrate towards this. I get a rush and a high from it because literally deep down inside, I've got so much shame, so much guilt, so much fear. The biggest fear I have is fear of getting exposed, fear of people knowing who I really am, fear of people finding the other side. So I'm constantly in the process of protection. That's where the word fantasy comes into play. So I live in a fantasy world. We see it a lot of times. Years ago, I worked in 2 different drug rehabs. We had guys there that were committed off the streets, and they had nothing. And yet, because they were so down on themselves, out on themselves, they would literally, when they finally got out of rehab, they would go around. First thing they would do is try to go to a thrift store and get a 3-piece suit, get a briefcase, and walk around and look like they're somebody. When in reality, it's not who they were. Very many people who are down really this low have a tendency, to buy a car, drive it for 2 weeks, and get it repossessed. But for 2 weeks, I felt good. For 2 weeks, I was somebody. A lot of what I'm talking about today with these types of addictions comes down to the fact that deep down inside, I'm spiritually dead and I'm spiritually empty, which means I have no sense of who I am as a person. And again, I can relate to this a little bit in my own life, because for a long period of time when I was in my early years of the priesthood, I functioned great externally, but internally I was empty. I was scared. I had no idea who I was. And I was getting involved in doing things, didn't even know how I was doing them. But see, I'm good at functioning externally. But the internal part of me was so empty that I kept these secrets deep down inside of myself. And those secrets go back to my childhood. And my therapist said this to me a long time ago, that I was emotionally incested. Not physically, emotionally, which meant that my mother actually made me into her spouse and centralized her life around me, the control that went along with that. And as a result, I had no idea who I was, or what I was going, what I was doing. So I lived out everybody else's dream. At the same time, I was empty on the inside. So much fear, so much anxiety. And then you take this to a deeper level, when it comes to the addictions, especially gamblers. Gamblers are so addicted to the rush and the high. And now in our society, good God, you can stay in bed and gamble all over the place. Technology has taken us another direction today. And so the bottom line is, sports, everything's connected around gambling today. So gamblers very many times get so caught up in looking for the magic, for the big fix, for something to that effect. It's no different than a heroin fix or an alcohol fix. It's a fix. And if you actually confront a gambler and tell him that the house is being repossessed, this is happening, your family's leaving you, they'll act like nothing's happening. They'll say, not a problem. I'll go to the track tomorrow and get it all straightened out. Even though they'll go to the track tomorrow and go right down to the loop again. It's like I'm looking for the magic. We see it now with the lottery. People, senior citizens especially, buying 100 tickets, looking for that magic thing at the end of the rainbow. And as a result, they're constantly putting themselves into jeopardy. And the same thing goes with compulsive shoplifting. All these things, it comes down to the act of an impulse. It comes down to this process inside of, I want to live in this fantasy world. And there is something about that, about getting away with something. I'm sure all of us have done a little bit of this. Did you ever try in supermarkets to sneak coupons through, even though you know they're expired, hoping they won't catch them? Now, that's what I call a little high when you got it through. Then you feel guilty as hell going home because you did it. Or they didn't ring up a certain product that was on your cart. You get out in your car, you notice that they never paid for this. Then here comes the addict inside of you. Oh, well, their fault. Blame them. But then the other part of you might want to bring it back and tell them you didn't pay for it. There's that conflict that goes on inside constantly. It's so scary. And yet, because I know all of us, we're normal human beings, and there is that drive for the rush and the high and the anticipation and getting away with something and being able to get, that's all. Fantasy is great, by the way, sometimes. But if you know you're in fantasy, it's okay, especially when it comes to relationships. Fantasy addicts, when it comes to relationships, love to get involved with people that are not available for relationships. See, if I can't have you, then I want you. If you become available, get lost. I have all these magical relationships in my head, and as a result, then we basically, we never act out on them because we're too scared. And so what do? I keep wanting to be with somebody I can't be with. And the classic case, I want to bring it out there. I've shared it so many times in my lectures, but it's so classic, it's unbelievable. And it goes back to, you saw the burning bed, different kinds of things that happen as a result of this, people going off the deep end. A lady right here in Cherry Hill, worked for a gentleman as his administrative secretary, did a wonderful job. But while she worked for him, she fell in love with him. He had no idea at all she was in love with him. But here's how fantasizers think when it comes to relationships. From 9 to 5, he belongs to me. What he does after 5 o'clock, I don't want to know. He was married and had kids. So basically, he just thought he had a fantastic, wonderful receptionist. So as a result, then, basically, one day, the other woman, his wife, had the audacity to come to take her husband out to lunch by surprise. While they were at lunch, she became extremely jealous, went off the deep end, and literally tore his office apart while they were at lunch. The anger, the rage, the stuff that went along with it. See, basically, whenever you're found out, or whenever you have to face something you want to face, but see, in her mind, this relation was real, even though it wasn't real. And these fantasies can be very scary sometimes because you get caught up in them and they become a way of life for you. And yet you have to realize the fact they're not real. I see this over and over again so many times, in situations where people are lonely and people are scared, but they're too scared to really understand what relationships really are. And so they migrate towards these fantasies. They live in this fantasy world. We see this when things like computer sex and the whole concept of chat rooms and things to that effect. It's all this magic, this crazy stuff in your head, but it's also scary. Now, I'll give you one of the scariest intakes I ever did in my life, and it brings this addiction out so clearly. I had two young ladies come in and tell me they wanted to talk to me because they were thinking about getting into treatment. Because they had just dealt with their drug and alcohol addiction, but now they wanted to deal with their sexual addiction. They told me their story. For a long period of time, they had made a lot of money as basically being call girls. And one girl told me that sometimes she made $2,000 and $3,000 a week. And the whole thing was just a job to them. But now they're coming into recovery and they're trying to make changes in their life. And how do you take somebody who's making $3,000 a week and now you can get her a job for $15 an hour? This transition, this change, scary. That's why sometimes it's so hard to break the patterns, because you keep looking for that fix, for that ending. And as a result, you get so used to it and so comfortable with it. You literally shut down your spiritual self, your insides. And as a result, you live on the outside. Now, to be spiritually dead simply means I have no idea who I am. I have no idea where I'm going. I have no idea of myself as a person. And so as a result, literally, what I do is I create an image. I try to live the image. But the image can only go so far, because then people expect you always to be that image. And so you start making changes, they get scared, they get afraid. And that's why so many times we see this, especially among predominant people that are in positions of power. We see this going on right now over in Ukraine, a gentleman in a position of power. And as a result, then this power can drive you to do things. You've seen this so many times in things like Hitler. They drive you, these addictions can have you become a cult leader after a while. It's just scary, some of the things you do. Jimmy Jones. All these things are examples and concepts of what I refer to as the fantasy addictions. And again, so many times they're interrelated to deep down inside, there's some deep trauma. There's anger, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of stuff going on inside of you. And that's why it's so important in treating these types of addictions that you have a lot of understanding and a lot of patience. Because it's not something you just do simply. I know for years I worked in a program over in Philadelphia. I would go there twice a week. And I don't want to mention the program because there's a particular program that they don't make public. It's primarily for pedophiles. It's treating pedophiles. And I worked with them for a long period of time. And the scariest thing was some of the people in that room. In fact, one of my fellow priests was in that room. So many different people I met. And they came from all walks of life. Teachers, doctors. It's scary. And yet there is treatment for all these addictions. But the bottom line is you need to be able to, first of all, be able to admit to them. And I have to say this because I really believe, having done this work so many times with people, that only when people get to a point where somehow they're confronted and the addiction breaks down and they finally have to face what's really going on inside of them. And usually it's by coming from another trauma. It can come from legal, something legally happens to them. It can come from the loss of family. So many things can happen to bring it down. Yet at the same time, once they do get into treatment, there is treatment for them. And yet so many times in our society, unfortunately, And that's why with these types of addictions, when we do treat them, we have to be very confidential about treating them, because people can be exposed so easily. Because so many times, these are people, very many times because of their image, have been connected to power for a long period of time. And so as a result, in order to do treatment, you have to be able to bring them to a point where they're finally ready to face their secrets. See, it's not enough just to arrest the addiction, because if you don't deal with the trauma, you don't deal with the shame. And we see this in addicts a lot of times. A lot of recovering drug addicts and alcoholics migrate towards gambling. They migrate towards sexual addiction. They migrate towards sick relationships. It's almost like I can so easily put one addiction down, pick up another one, and just keep filling my void with another one, and another one. Because I go back to looking for the excitement and the insanity and the stuff that goes along with it. So I have to realize the fact that, yes, there is help, but it's specialized help. And if anybody ever needs help with this, I tell them to contact me, and I'll tell them where to go and how to get that help. But it's really important, because I really believe deep down inside that all of us are beautiful human beings. We make mistakes, yes. And do these traumas of childhood, these traumas of life affect us in very many different ways? Yes. And so many times, even as we get older, we begin to migrate towards these types of addictions because out of loneliness, out of sadness, out of looking for something to make me feel better. And that rush and that high is the scariest of all things. And that's why so many times I equate them back to the concept of drug and alcohol addiction and cocaine and stuff to that effect. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. And again, it's sad, and yet at the same time, this is what happens. A lady, and I'm going back a few years now, okay, so put up with me a little bit, especially if you're younger in here. A lady went to a place called Walmart, you may know it, and she bought a stereo set. Remember those old stereo sets? Brought it home, unpacked the box, and found out that one of the knobs on the stereo set was missing. Come on, it's Walmart. You bring this set back, they give you another one. But there's something about this drive and compulsion. She had to go to Walmart, go to that department, and somehow, some way, she had to take the knob off of one of the sample ones and just do it secretly and everything else. And she felt so good about doing that. The only problem was they have these things called cameras, and they caught her. She ended up being taken down to legal. Her husband was called. Her husband saying to her, "What's wrong with you?" The husband made good money. She was very well off. And literally, what she did was insane. It was crazy. And yet, when you have that compulsion inside of you, it's almost like if I'm raised in insanity, that I'm used to insanity. If I'm raised in abuse, I'm used to abuse. That's why I said back in the beginning, so many times we look back into these, do therapy with people, we find out there's a secret. And that secret has held them for a long period of time. A lady I know in recovery today, and I'm grateful for her being in recovery. I know she won't mind me sharing her story, but she didn't come into the rooms of recovery till she was 63 years old. She went through 4 marriages. She went through the loss of children. She went through so many traumas in her life. It was unbelievable. So one day she came to see me and she said, "I just can't do this anymore. I can't live this way anymore. I got to tell somebody something." And so I was a priest at the time, so I know that through the concept of confidentiality, she exposed to me that when she was a child, she was severely abused by her uncle and by her brother, sexually abused. And she had held that secret inside of her for so long that it kept her into her addiction, into her behaviors, into everything. Finally, at age 63, a lot of help, a lot of work, a lot of step work. She now has over 20 years of recovery and is doing very well in the program today. She changed her life completely. But she was in therapy for over 5 years dealing with trauma. And trauma is a powerful thing because what it does is it actually binds you. It holds everything inside of you. And then what do I have to do? How to avoid having to feel it and deal with it. And that's where the image thing comes into play. Because instead of me dealing with it and feeling it, then what do I have to do? I have to almost live a fantasy that this is not really happening. See, I'm in control. I can handle anything. Bring it on. At the same time, I can't handle anything. So it's almost like having an unmanageable life, an insane life, at the same time, thinking your life is sane and manageable. Because externally, you're functioning, internally, you're a mess. This is really prevalent so many times in adult children of alcoholics, adult children of drug addicts, children that come from homes where there's so many secrets, it's unbelievable. And then as you grow up, you create more secrets and more secrets and more secrets. And then you're so scared you're going to get exposed. So what do? You're going to protect the secret as much as possible. Make sure nobody gets too close. And that's why I said back in the beginning, these are scary, scary addictions. And they're addictions that can happen to anyone because we have these compulsive drives inside of us. And as a result, then we can so easily get caught up in this. And so many times we have to literally understand, what am I really searching for? I'm searching for a sense of who I really am, for the simplicity of a simple lifestyle, and to be able to live without fear and guilt. To be able to live in peace and serenity inside of me. Inside. Then things will be taken care of on the outside. But it does involve a lot of change and a lot of work. It's all part of it. I want to share one more story with you to bring out this concept, and then I'll kind of close with a prayer today. I really want to try to drive this home. A number of years ago, I had a lady come here, and she actually brought her husband with her. I get a kick sometimes because the husband looked like he had a ball and chain around his leg. He was being forced to come in. Anyway, he sat in one corner. She was in the other corner. And basically, she said to me, I got a major problem, Vince. Maybe you can explain it to this man. Exactly what she called him. To this man. I said, what? Well, we have a business. He's the only employee. He's self-employed. He just bought another truck. Now he's got these two beautiful trucks they're making payments on. And he's the only employee. He only drive one at a time. And he stood up and he started screaming at her and saying, come on, I go to work every day. I go to work 4 o'clock in the morning, come home 10, 11 o'clock at night. I bring in over $2,800 to $3,000 a week. And here's, excuse my language, he says, and I give it to this bitch. That's what he called her. See, once again, he's being confronted. So here comes all the anger, all the stuff out of him. She brought the books. She showed them to me. She said, yeah, he makes close to $3,000 a week, but our expenses are close to $4,300 a week. We have a problem. His response was, I don't know what she does with the money. See, she's the one that's doing crazy stuff with the money. That's why it is the way it is. Here comes that blame game again. I use it as examples because I really believe sometimes that we get in over our heads, that we don't know how to get out of over our heads. So what do? We get deeper into our heads. Situations become worse. And then we have to actually deal with them. It's painful. And Bradshaw says so beautifully in the book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, It's so painful that what you do is you put that wall around you, that protection around you. If anybody gets too close, you're going to let them have it. You'll drive them down. You call them names, whatever you got to do just to get them away from me. But that blame game is so scary. And when you get caught up in playing it, it can become your norm. And so I share these addictions with you because I call them the fantasy addictions. And they're addictions that are real. They're based on compulsion. I hope it gets you to understand them a little bit better today and have a little more compassion for people when they have to deal with this in recovery. And to realize the fact that we're all just human beings. We have our stuff. Many of us have dealt with secrets on a smaller level. They can become bigger in no time at all. So I pray that God will help us to be able to share these, be able to deal with them, and be able to realize the fact of their importance. I also want to mention, just before I say my prayers, is next week I'll be doing caretaking addictions. And that's one, it's probably the one I really enjoy doing. So it'll be kind of a wacky week next week compared to a little depressing week today. So we'll see what happens. Let us pray. God, we ask your grace, your protection, and your love for all those who suffer from these particular addictions. Please, God, walk alongside of them. Hopefully, we hope that they'll ask for your help, for your guidance. I know you keep sending messengers into their life. Sometimes even you have to send pain into their life just to awaken them, to help them. But above all, we remember to pray. And but for the grace of God, be grateful. And always realize the fact that you are working with us, God. Help us to let go of those false images, those things we basically run away from and hide. And let's be open to learn, grow, to be able to share our secrets, to share them with people we have the trust to share them with, so we can experience growth, help, and we can be able to experience healing. God, we ask your guidance, your direction, as you help us on this journey of life, not to judge others, but to be able to pray for them, wish them well, and hope to God in many ways we can learn and grow from these experiences and things we go through in life. We pray for your blessing, and we ask God to bless all those who have gone before us and all those who will come after us, but to bless us on our journey today. We ask this in your name. Amen. Now I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, unmuting, and we'll kind of close out by saying the Serenity Prayer today, and we'll try our best to do a little bit of unison here. And by the way, we're going to use the we version.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not mine, be done.